So, finding the proper spiritual teacher who's qualified, is very, very important. We don't have that much time, actually. Okay. So let's continue. Are there any questions about that whole, actually anything that we've talked about, but particularly, I know maybe some people have had experiences with controversial teachers or something? No? Yes?
The question is that, how necessary is it to look for just one teacher? And when you see teacher, are you talking about the guru that you follow for years, or the ability to learn from, like if you go to a direction and try to learn, like as we do it every day, like we learn from a lot of different sources, right?
Yeah.
Look at that, I don't know how that works.
Yeah. Well, in general, we should be using everything as our teacher. I mean, in some way, right? So, the great yogi Milarepa, who we mentioned before, who is very devoted to Marpa, you'll see him when he's depicted, he has, his hand to his ear. So they say he was always like listening. He spent a lot of his time in caves meditating, but he was always listening, for the advice of his guru. But then one day, Milarepa was famous for being so poor that he only had one clay bowl like this. Then one day, this is his only possession, and he would eat like these wild nettles, these like thorny, this thorny kind of plant, nettles. He would boil that and eat that. So then one day, his clay bowl falls and shatters. I thought, this is the blessing of my guru to remind me about impermanence. Right. So when we know a little bit, then we can actually use our daily life experiences to reflect on these points. But that's not what we're talking about. Here, when we're saying cherishing the spiritual teacher, finding a guru, all this stuff, at a certain point in your development, it's kind of like this. Any skill or, anything we're trying to learn, then we need to learn from someone who knows, right? And then can teach us. So even, I don't know, learning how to speak Spanish or learning how to play the guitar, something like this, right? It's useful to have someone that we can learn from, okay? So now, here, when we're talking about the attainment of enlightenment, which is something we've never done before, then of course we need someone that can show us the path, okay? And then later, when we start to get into more advanced practices, like in the Vajrayana or the Tantra, then an initiation. You need to get an initiation, right? And the initiating master, then if you take an initiation from someone, they become your guru officially. And that relationship is actually forever. You understand? So then it's very, very important to choose that one well. Okay? And then all these things that we've talked about, like making sure they're coming from a proper lineage, making sure that their motivation is good, means solely focused on your well-being and not thinking of themselves, right? I don't know, there's a lot more to say on this, but I know I'll just share something from my own experience, right? Because maybe some of us are like this, right? We're seekers. We're looking for something, you know? And unfortunately, yeah, people can take advantage of it, you know? When I was in Thailand, on my first trip around Asia, exploring different spiritual traditions, I met someone in Bangkok. And I told him what I was doing. You know, I'm traveling around Asia to explore various spiritual traditions. I'm interested in meditation, yoga. And he says, "Oh, well, I'm a yoga teacher. I'll teach you." Okay. You know, there's this saying, right? When the student is ready, the guru will appear, right? And for some of us, you know, you kind of, I don't know, like I was thinking, okay, let me be open. Let me open my heart and see what the universe brings to me, right? So, right? So, you know, I start to learn meditation from this so-called guru. Then very, very soon, you know, at the end of the first thing, oh, you know, I've helped you now. Now you can help me. I'm building an ashram in India. And, you know, give money so we can build this ashram. Right? So then also it's like, oh, what the, you know, you're normally the mind is like, this is strange. But then you have this thought like, oh, but wait a minute, this could be a teaching for me to get over my attachments, right? So I gave, you know. And you hear stories of, I mean, and so, whatever, a few $100 lost, or maybe he builds an ashram, I'm not sure. But you hear other stories where, especially for you ladies, right, these gurus, they're, you know, they're interested in something else. And then even these hang-ups, it's like, you know, then they have all these excuses. Well, we're trying to overcome duality, you know? Or like all these things you hear, right? You know, these hang-ups you have are what are keeping you from the realization, you know? Let go. All these things. Yeah? So then, a bit difficult. A bit difficult. So there is a saying, an ancient saying from Tibet, that your guru should be more concerned about you than they are themselves. And when they're concerned about you, that means they're concerned about what happens to you in your next life more than what happens to you in this life. And then more important than what happens to you in your next life is that you attain liberation from samsara. And more important that you attain liberation from samsara, you attain full enlightenment. So your guru should be focused on that and not about themselves. So then a modern teacher had his own spin on it, Zongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, who says that, your guru shouldn't be interested in your wallet or your thighs. Okay. So anyway, these abuses of power are happening, and they're only going to increase as the times get more degenerated. Okay? So
then we have the stories about all the crazy wisdom saints in Tibet.
yes. Yeah. It's there. But I think it's very dangerous. Even we're talking about Milarepa and Marpa. So Marpa actually, Milarepa in the early part of his life, he practiced black magic. And anyway, through his practice of black magic, he killed human beings as well as, some horses and whatnot. Okay? So heavy negative karma. When he then finally met Marpa, you see, we're going to get to this later, but our negative karma can be purified, right? It can be purified. And the best way to purify is actually through service to the guru. And so Marpa then put Milarepa to work building a 9-story tower out of stones. And then after he built the tower, Milarepa would go to Marpa and say, okay, I finished your work. And then Marpa said, who told you to build the tower? Put all those stones back to where you found them. So he was constantly, scolded and this kind of thing. When Milarepa would come for teachings, Marpa would say, hey, get out of here. Be quite abusive. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he's even said, nowadays, a guru can't show that appearance that Marpa showed, because they'd be sued. It's true. So I consider myself extremely fortunate that, none of my gurus have taken on a controversial aspect, right? So of course, the enlightened ones, they appear in many different kinds of forms to benefit sentient beings, And, it says even in the traditional texts that bodhisattvas would appear as, madmen, as prostitutes, as, whatever, right? Whatever is needed. Nonetheless, for our deluded minds, we run the risk, then if we lose faith in the guru, when they show this kind of different appearance, are we going to lose faith? And one thing just also worth mentioning, See, even when we have taken someone on as our teacher officially, that doesn't mean then we do everything they say. Right? And so, you know, especially if things are not in accord with the Dharma, you have a responsibility, not to do them. There's a story from the Buddha's own previous life. Apparently there's some provision that in times of famine, or that Brahmins are allowed to steal. There's something like this. So the Buddha in his past life, his teacher then told all the students, okay, go out and steal. It's okay. So then there's, 30 students, and 29 come back and, this is what I've stolen. But the Buddha's previous life then said, no, I didn't do it. It's never right to steal. Okay? And so the teacher said, yes, you're right. So it was just a test. So it doesn't mean, even though we find a guru, it doesn't mean then we let our own inner kind of conscience and faculty of wisdom and sense of right and wrong, we don't give that up. So anyway, I don't know, did I answer your question? Eventually we'll need a guru like that. Because, by the way, when we were saying you can all become enlightened in this body, you're going to become enlightened in this body by practicing the Vajrayana teachings. And in order to do that, you need initiation. And in order to get initiation, you need a guru. In order to get a guru, you need to find a qualified guru. And therefore, you need to check that they have the qualities or not. Okay? All right. Stanza 7. Bound himself in the jail of cyclic existence, what worldly god can give you protection? Therefore, when you seek refuge, take refuge in the three jewels which will not betray you. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. Okay. So, refuge. Refuge. In general, this word refuge, right? So normally, to give a very worldly example, during monsoon time, right? It starts to rain. You don't want to get wet. You see a building, looks like it has a solid roof. You go inside the building and you avoid getting wet, right? So we say, so then, that building is like our refuge, right? So in general, to take refuge, they say there's two causes. Fear, which really means we see some undesirable condition that we don't want to experience. And then faith. Faith is more like, confidence that kind of source of refuge has the ability to protect us from that undesirable circumstance. Okay? So in the rain and roof analogy, the undesirable thing is getting wet, and we have faith that the roof can protect us. So then we go under the roof. So here now, remember when I was talking about Lamrim, stage of the path? So actually, that genre So they actually call the Lamrim, they divide it into the 3 types of person. Okay? Which is basically the 3 levels of motivation that we can have when we undertake our Dharma practice. Yeah, bearing in mind that remember, the bar, the minimum standard for us to become, Dharma practitioners at all is to prioritize our future lives more than this life. Right? So the initial, or the so-called, small capability person, right, is primarily interested in avoiding a bad rebirth in the next life and getting another good one. Then all of these, and by the way, we're still in these stanzas, we're in the practices in common with a small capability person, right? So how do we do that? We meditate on our precious human rebirth. We think that we're going to die, and then we consider after we die what's going to happen. Our consciousness is either going to take rebirth in the lower realms or the higher realms, and then we see that the cause of getting rebirth in the lower realms is non-virtue. The cause of getting rebirth in the higher realm is virtue. So then it becomes clear. Abandon negativity as much as possible and accumulate as much virtue as we can. So that is the main practice of this initial practitioner, the small capable being. Okay? Then when we go to the medium capable being, which we'll get to soon, right? They see everything that the small capable being sees, but then even if they're able to be successful in their practice and get a good rebirth in the next life, then what? What about the life after that? Or the one after that? So there's no stability. There's no stability. And by the way, even we look at this good rebirth that we have as a human, there's still so many different problems, right? Sickness, Tibetan medicine. I'm joking, I'm sure. There's so many problems. Not meeting with the things that we want, being separated from the things even after we get them, trying with a lot of effort to get the things that we want and not succeeding, getting old, and dying. Anyway, so they see that even getting a good rebirth in the next life is not the answer, and rather they understand that they need to get rid of the whole cycle of uncontrolled rebirth, and therefore they aspire for liberation. Now the great scope, the great capable being, is now the Mahayana practitioner, who sees that even if they get personal liberation for oneself, as we said, right? If our mothers, who love us from time without beginning, are still suffering, then what use? What's the big deal with my own happiness? And therefore they forego the individual liberation. They don't set that as their goal, but rather aspire to the highest state of enlightenment. Okay? All right. So then each of these 3 scopes, or the 3 types of person, then there's an undesirable thing that they want to avoid, and then they seek a source of refuge that can protect us from it. And so so I remember, my mother, right, before I ordained, I brought her to India, and I wanted to tell her in person that I was going to ordain. And we went to Dharamsala, and she saw the Dalai Lama, and also met my teacher there. And as she was listening to this explanation, so she's Catholic. I was raised Catholic. And she said, "Oh, so that means, us Christians, we're only small scope or small capable beings." Understand? I said, "Yes, Mom, you've been paying attention very well." Right? So, right? Abandoning non-virtue and engaging in virtue so that after this life, they're born in heaven, right? Rather than in hell. It's true. So, for that reason, you see, the great Indian master Chandrakirti says that the 3 jewels of refuge here, 3 jewels, means the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. They are the source of refuge for those desiring liberation from samsara. Actually, you see, now why is that? Because the root of samsara is karma and afflictions. The root of the root is the misapprehension about how our self and other phenomena exist. Right? And therefore, actually of the 3 jewels of refuge, the actual refuge is the Dharma itself. You understand? So again, a medical analogy, right? If you get sick, yes, you go to a doctor, but the real thing that cures you is the medicine, right? The doctor can see your symptoms and prescribe and convince you to take the medicine even though it doesn't taste good. So the Buddha is like the doctor, but the Dharma is like the medicine. That's the real thing that is going to cure you, right? And here, to be more precise, the real Dharma jewel, right? The 3 jewels. The Dharma jewel is the true cessation of suffering, and the true path leading to the cessation of suffering. So that means the true path is the mind that directly perceives the ultimate nature of reality, emptiness or shunyata. Then once we have a direct realization of that, only that mind has the power to abandon the wrong conception of the self, the misconception of the self. You understand? So that's the real refuge. The real refuge. So because of that, then it is, and you can check this out, but it's the unique teaching of the Buddha to talk about the ultimate nature of reality in this way. So anyway, but it's important to note, see, this practice of taking refuge, there is a ceremony about it, and that's how one would formally become Buddhist, right? But really, it just means to commit yourself to training your mind in the way that's been laid out, in these texts and treatises. So just like if it starts raining and you see the roof, you don't just say, "Oh, may the roof protect me," and but you have to go under the roof, right? So many people, it's kind of like you can treat the Buddha like some people might treat God, in the sense that go give me something, or like, you know. Oftentimes in the monastery, you know, people make some offerings, and then they write a dedication with that. And sometimes, one of the dedications was, you know, so that they could quickly buy a new car. You understand? Anyway, the point is, the real practice of going for refuge means to reaffirm one's commitment to the path. Okay? And then, once you do that, I mean, as it said, the Buddha himself said that, you know, we need to become our own refuge. Right? Means that, you know, the Buddha taught that all suffering comes from non-virtue, and happiness comes from virtue. So that's what we have to do, right? Rather than, I don't know, we kind of ignore all the Buddha's teachings yet still have like all this faith. It's not going to be very successful. So that brings us to stanza 8. The subduer means the Buddha said that all unbearable suffering of bad rebirths is the fruit of wrongdoing. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never do wrong. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So, in general, this is where we would talk in some detail about karma. So as we mentioned before, what actually determines whether our actions are virtue or non-virtue is the motivation with which we undertake them. But I think, who was it? Someone yesterday was asking about the stepping on a bug, right? So actually, for a karmic action to be complete, there needs to be 4 factors. Okay? Oh, well, let me first say this. When we talk about wrongdoing, yes, the most important is our motivation. But they have, there's a presentation of the so-called 10 non-virtues, okay, which are 3 of body, killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. 4 of speech, means lying. Then divisive speech. Divisive speech would be, you know, if 2 people are getting along well, and maybe you get jealous, like, I don't know, right? I'm just saying, like, 2 people are friends. Like, I'm friends with Capucine, then she starts to go with someone else. Then I say, oh, but you know, to try to divide people. Yeah, divisive speech. Yeah. Then harsh speech means to, you know, criticize, or, you know, name calling. And then the last, gossiping, or senseless talk. Yeah. Talk that will raise the level of afflictions. Okay? And then the 3 non-virtues of mind are covetousness. Covetousness means, you know, to see something that someone else has and wanting it. Malice, which is a wish that harm occur to someone else. And then wrong views. Wrong views in again is the 100%, you know, definite thought that liberation or enlightenment or past and future lives, these things, they don't exist. Okay? All right. So, for a karmic action to be complete, then these 4 factors also have to be there. So let's take the example of killing. You need the agent, means, me. So I'm just saying, as an example, right? Then you need the object, right, which is another living being. Okay? Then you need the thought. So in this, there is one needs to be able to, one needs to discriminate the object as a living being. You understand? Right? Okay. Then you have the intention to kill. And then you have the, what is it called? The affliction. The affliction. So here, the 3 poisonous minds, right? Attachment, aversion, or anger, and ignorance. Okay? So killing can be done with attachment, means you might be attached to the taste of the meat, and therefore kill. You can have anger, like you don't like the pain that the mosquito is causing you, so you kill it. Or you can have ignorance. Ignorance means, in this case, it would be like thinking that animal sacrifice, killing an animal would please some kind of god, and therefore, killing goats as an animal sacrifice. Okay? Then there's the action. The action in this case would be, either doing it yourself with a weapon, your fists, or poison, or, something. Either doing it yourself or asking someone else to do it for you. And then the completion of that action means the other, that living being dies. Okay? So those factors need to be in there. The thought is divided into a few parts. Okay? So then when you understand this, then, you can infer these other cases, right? Like, if you're walking along and you happen to step on a bug, well, that wouldn't be a complete karmic action because you didn't recognize the bug to be there. You didn't have an intention to kill, like this. Yeah. So then by just knowing one, you can also then infer the rest, right? So stealing would then be, you have to recognize that object doesn't belong to you, right? And then, you have the person, the thief, the other person, whose property it is. Then you have to have the recognition that actually does not belong to you. Then you have the action. And then the completion, actually, interestingly enough, is just to have the thought that this is mine. Okay? So if someone were to come and steal this cup, actually this one's nicer. You come in during the break time, you want to steal the cup, and then even you do like this, it's mine. And then someone walks in, and you go, or you're like cleaning it. The action of stealing has happened. So this is talking about karma, very different from the law, right? Okay. So yeah. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never do wrong. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Why? Because you see, we don't want suffering. And therefore, if we don't want the effect of suffering, we have to abandon the cause of suffering, which is non-virtue. Okay? All right. We go till 5?
Yeah. That's the plan.
Huh?
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Yeah. Okay. That's good. We can do this last stanza about the faults of samsara. Like dew on the tip of a grass, the pleasures of the three world last only a while and then vanish. Aspire to the never-changing supreme state of liberation. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Okay? So by the way, up to then to stanza 8 is when we compare it with the Lamrim, this is the small capable being, is the first 8 stanzas, right? They want a good rebirth in their next life. They want to avoid wrong rebirth, so they mostly practice this. Never doing wrong. Okay? So now stanza 9 is the stanza on the middle capability of practitioner. So, this supreme state of liberation. Okay, aspire to the never-changing supreme state of liberation. Okay? So, normally, in this context, you'll hear the word renunciation. Yeah? Yeah? And it's not a great... Well, I have qualms about this translation. Because actually, the word in Tibetan is ne-jung. Ne-jung. Ne is definite, and jung means to emerge. Okay? Huh? Yes. So what it actually means is what it's saying here, right? You have to have the thought that definitely, I need to emerge. Emerge from what? Samsara. The uncontrolled cycle of rebirth. You understand? Nge is definite. Right? So, renunciation, it's like, oh no, I'm giving this up. Okay, no. What we need to give up is samsara. But, this word, nejung, this describes it better. Is to have this aspiration, for the never-changing supreme state of liberation. And in order to do that, in order to have this mind, we need to then view the faults or the drawbacks of samsara or cyclic existence. There's one text, the Guru Puja actually, by Penchen Losang Chugi Gyaltsen. And in it he says, he asks his guru, to please bless me that I would be able to overcome the mind that views samsara like a pleasure grove. So, the samsara, you see, we think it's good, right? Or, I don't know. It's kind of like this, right? A prison, okay, a prison, then apparently in the U.S., the people who do white collar crimes, white collar crimes, embezzling. Okay, white collar, it means people in offices, right? So they'll embezzle, means they might, make false financial statements to kind of steal money, right? Okay, that's what I call it, white collar crime. But versus violent crimes, right? Like armed robbery and murder, all that stuff. So the people who do white collar crimes, there's some very nice prisons for them. Yeah. Some of them have tennis courts, swimming pools. Food that's probably better than what I get in the monastery. Okay? So you can imagine if you don't really see the drawbacks of that place, if you're in that kind of prison, but you see it as, oh, it's so nice, then even, let's say the guard is not looking and let's say the door is open, you might even close the door, right? So you have to first see the drawbacks of samsara before you can generate the wish to be free of it. Okay? So in general, there is huge presentation of the various sufferings of samsara. And actually, the Buddha's own first teaching that he gave after he was enlightened, he gave on the Four Noble Truths. And the first is the truth of suffering, right? Truth of suffering, and then the truth of the cause of suffering, then the truth of the cessation of suffering, and then the truth leading to the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Okay? So in the traditional text, you'll see this doubt come up, where they say, wait a minute. Usually, one way of doing it is you talk about the cause first, and then the effect, right? But here, the effect is talked about first, truth of suffering, and then the cause, and then the truth of cessation. But actually the cause of the truth of the cessation, or the attainment of the truth of cessation, is the truth of the path, right? So why did the Buddha mix up the order? And then the answer is because we have such a fundamental addiction to samsara, that the Buddha needed to then talk in depth about the faults of samsara, the truth of suffering, so that we then loosen, or maybe we're able to loosen its hold on us. Understand? So, in the text, you'll often see, there's 8 types of suffering. There's 6 types of suffering. There's 3 types of suffering. Okay? Now, the 8 types of suffering, we have the first 4. Birth, the suffering of birth, suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, suffering of death. Okay? Then we have the suffering of not getting what we want. The suffering of meeting with things that we don't want. The suffering of separating from the things that we do want and have. And then they talk about the the suffering of the contaminated appropriated aggregates, which just means this body and mind that we have is a vessel for future suffering. Right? So this type of body and mind, it's been projected or propelled by previous karma that was activated at the last moment of our previous life. And since we still are under the control of the misapprehension of the way the self exists, actually every moment we're creating karma that will then become the cause to project us into future rebirths. And as long as we have this type of body that is projected by previous karma and affliction, one type of suffering experience or another is bound to happen. So let me also say this. Even this translation of suffering, dukkha, dukkha, as suffering, is also problematic. Normally when we think of suffering, we're thinking of pain, right? But the other presentation of suffering into the presentation of three, we have the suffering of suffering, and then the suffering of change, and then the suffering of the all-pervasive compounded suffering. Now, suffering of suffering we know, right? Headaches, mental or physical pain, right? But the suffering of change actually is the pleasant experiences that we have in samsara. You understand? So, that's why this word suffering, maybe we can think more of, unsatisfactoriness. Right? So even the, I don't know what you guys like. Ice cream on a hot day. Right? No. Hot cocoa on a cold day. Okay, anyway, whatever you guys like. Right? Whatever you guys like. Even I like ice cream, but not when I'm sick. But even that first lick of ice cream, that's suffering of change. But it's a pleasant experience. It's a pleasant experience that has arisen due to, actually, the main thing is actually due to the virtue that I've created in the past. Right? Because without that, then, if, like some of us here, they don't derive pleasure from ice cream. Right? So even the fact that ice cream would be, delicious and tasty to us depends on our karma. Yeah. Anyway, the point is, it's unsatisfactory in nature. Because, well, I guess fundamentally, like dew on the tip of a grass, the pleasures of the three worlds last only a while and then vanish. So this is what he's talking about, right? The ice cream, I don't know, watching a sunset, I don't know. Yes, it's good, but they last only a while and then they vanish. They're impermanent in nature. So just the fact that they're impermanent means they're unsatisfactory, or could be better, or problematic, or some other word that we should come up with for this Pali word dukkha. Yeah? So, sometimes actually in one course the November course in Kopan. It's a 1-month course on Lamrim. I did it in 2005. And I still remember there was a Russian who had a big problem with all this. You know? And it was like, you know, it's so pessimistic. You're just talking, you know, suffering, suffering, suffering. You know? And she said, but just go out and look at the sunset. It's so beautiful. You know?
One day closer to death.
What's that?
One day closer to death.
No. It wasn't you. It wasn't you. But, you know, and even in some other intro courses that I go to, then, you know, there is this kind of, this thought that, oh, it's such a negative philosophy, always talking about suffering, right? But I'll leave you with this. See, the Buddha taught the 4 Noble Truths, not just the 2, right? So if it was just the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering, and, you know, he stopped after that, then, you know, we could say, hey, Buddha, come on, let us have our sunsets and pina coladas, right? But he went on and said, no, actually, there's a way, okay, there's a state that's totally, you know, cessation, right, to stop, where the suffering is abandoned and you no longer have to experience. And there's a path that leads you to that. Right? So then, you see, I don't know, is it optimistic? I don't know if it's optimistic, pessimistic, but that's the truth. That's the truth he discovered and taught to us. Right? And so, actually, about samsara, we should be very pessimistic. We should be. But since there's this alternative, that is, you know, the never-changing supreme state of liberation. Wow. You know, this is what they say, right? Once we've attained liberation, you know, there's no going back. Right? So they say the attainment of liberation is one-time work. One-time work. Whereas everything else in samsara, we have to do again and again and again. You understand? Like all, you know, everything we've done in this life, we have to do again and again. You know, going to school, getting a job, making money, getting a spouse, having children. We've done that so many times in the past. There's nothing new in samsara. Nothing new. We've experienced everything so many times before. And yet, we still haven't had enough. Have we? Ugh. Feeling sick to my stomach. Not from the Tibetan medicine. So, yeah. In the 6 types of suffering, and I kind of get them mixed up a little bit. But anyway, there is this the suffering, which is this is the worst one in some respects, but the suffering of no satisfaction. Right? Means maybe we've seen this, you know. Uh, I'm just remembering a good friend of mine from university. I visited him on my trip. He was working in Japan as a currency trader or something, right? And then he told me, in all seriousness, so he's also from Hawaii, and he wanted to move back to Hawaii, right? So I asked him, oh, so when are you going to move? When are you thinking? And he said with a really straight face, he's like, okay, I'm just thinking that once I've saved up $30 million, then I can move back to Hawaii. So we set these goals for ourselves, right? Most of the time, we don't succeed. But even when we do succeed, we still don't get the satisfaction that we thought we were going to get when we set out for that goal. So my friend actually, he's moved back to Hawaii. I never asked him, do you have $30 million? No. Yeah. So anyway, you guys get my point. And I haven't really gone into all the sufferings yet, right? Because we're out of time. But the thing I wanted to emphasize, again, right? It's all relative, okay? So relative to this state, the never-changing supreme state of liberation, then all these samsaric pleasures, it's not even a choice, right? No comparison, right? So again, as I was saying, right, it's not that these samsaric pleasures are bad, ultimately bad in and of themselves, but it's because, there's a saying in the text on monastic discipline that, we give up the great happiness to chase after these little happiness. But what we need to do is give up the small happiness to get the big happiness. Right? The big pleasure, yeah. You understand? So these, just the 45 minutes to and from the Italian restaurant, right? Actually, that's just a microcosm for our lives in samsara. Constantly chasing after these samsaric pleasures, which are ultimately unsatisfying, when we could be, could be liberated from all of samsaric suffering. In this life, we could actually attain enlightenment in this life. So then, what is, Yeah. What could be better, right? All right, so let's leave it at that for today. Yeah?